Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heartland Daily Podcast, where the focus today is on healthcare, as we do a couple of times each month. My name is AnneMarie Schieber. I'm the managing editor of Healthcare News, and joining me once again is Devin Herrick. He is a healthcare economist who posts on the Goodman Institute Healthcare blog. Good to see you again, Devin.
It's good to be here.
We've got a lot to talk about. The government is shut down. Have you noticed? It's been about a week. The reason the government is shut down is because Congress cannot agree on the terms to provide stopgap funding until November. This is when both political parties hold each other hostage for policy gains, I guess. The policy grab this time, drumbeat, is healthcare. The bottom line, the Democrats will not agree to approve a funding bill unless the Republicans agree to continue subsidizing Obamacare at COVID-19 levels. Okay, huge increases in subsidies. Those subsidies expire at the end of the year, and Republicans say that this is a separate issue and should not be part of a continuing resolution. A couple of things I want to discuss. This is going to take up much of our discussion today. What is going to happen if the Obamacare subsidies go away? And I want to focus our discussion on what's the best case scenario and what is the most likely scenario. Devin, you posted on this Stalemate on October 1st. I want to read something from this blog, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this. You wrote, Obamacare is a bad deal, regardless of who is paying the tab. And taxpayers subsidizing a bad deal to make it affordable distorts the market further and delays needed reform. The reality is ACA marketplace plans are beneficial for less than 10% of those who have them. Can you explain what that means?
Well, in healthcare, there is what's known as an 80-20 rule, and that is about 20% of the population accounts for, of the insured population accounts for about 80% of spending. And so by that measure, and then there was another estimate, I think it was from the Commonwealth Fund, that something like 80 to 90% of Obamacare enrollees do not surpass their deductible, which means they might as well be paying, cash out of pocket. The insurance is doing them, really no good. I mean, yeah, we can argue you have some level of protection. I don't want my house insurance to pay off with a hailstorm or a fire. But at the same time, my Obamacare coverage is about double what all my other insurance is put together. And so what Obamacare tried to do, and this has been tried before and it always had the same result, which is very high premiums, is Obamacare tried to force 90% of the population, according to statistics, to overpay for health insurance so that the less healthy 10% or 20% gets a good deal. And it's not an effective or efficient way really to cross-subsidize the sick. It would be, more efficient to have a more direct subsidy, because then the people who are relatively healthy would not have an incentive to bail out. So, it was a bad deal by design. It had been tried in states like New York, New Jersey, I think Washington State, a couple others, maybe Connecticut, I don't remember exactly. And the results were known. It's like, yeah, it provides coverage where you can buy in without having to be risk rated, but it's also causes high premiums.
Right.
Well, at the time, we already had a high risk pool, and the only complaint about the high risk pool was, well, it has high premiums. Okay, Obamacare is worse.
Right. And what you're saying is in 2010, we knew how this was going to fall out because other states have tried similar programs. And the numbers just didn't add up, but we went full force with it and forced it on the entire country. I want to talk about a couple of things. First, I want to ask you, maybe this is a good time to bring this point up, but in your blog, I thought you mentioned that this is going to be the end to $2 million a year drugs. Now, believe it or not, they do exist, right? These are for rare illnesses and orphan illnesses, and that's a whole different discussion because that is a real problem, and we've got to figure out a way to help those people. But the way this goes right now is nobody sees any bill. They don't pay anything directly. So when you say we've got a drug and it's going to cost you $1 million, $2 million a year, and somebody else is going to pay for it, what are you going to say? You're going to say, yeah, I'll go for it. I don't care if it doesn't work. I don't care if maybe even I get harmed by it. Because I have really no financial stake in this to really evaluate. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, one of the other costly regulations that was imposed on, by Obamacare is it banned all annual caps and lifetime caps on benefits. Before 2010, you could pick and choose, what coverage, or how much coverage do you want? If you want low deductibles with $5 million coverage, well, you could get that through Blue Cross. It was not cheap. It was rather expensive. That was a premium plan. Well, when they were devising Obamacare, people thought, the Democrats primarily thought, it's horrible that some people, very, very few people, max out their benefits. So they banned any kind of limits. Well, when you ban a limit, you essentially, you increase the price because the risk has gone up, but you create an incentive for those that sell treatments, like mainly drug companies and hospitals and the like. Well, the sky becomes a limit because there's automatically a market. So you have nothing to hold prices in check when you basically give a blank check to those that are providing care.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, I think this is going to be the beginning of the end of Obamacare. We tried to do this in 2017 and it fell short, a couple of votes. We're at it again. If the political will is there, and that's a big if members of Congress can resist the strong arming of big hospitals and big insurance, let's talk about how this could be a war of attrition, that Obamacare is going to find a natural death. Andy, I've got a lot to talk about. So are you able to pop up that graph? Because I want to go over some of these points and then hear your thoughts on them, Devin. The first one is premiums would certainly, so let's say the subsidies do not go through. Premiums would certainly go up, right? Healthy people would go without insurance. They would say, I'm not bothering with this. I'm not paying $17,000 a year for a plan I'm never going to use. They could sign on to alternatives like short-term plans, which Trump now is trying to unleash. They were restricted under the Biden administration, but now Trump says he's not going to enforce those rules. And perhaps there will be a number of companies offering those short-term plans for longer period of times. They could also go to health share ministries, which are a lot cheaper than Obamacare plans. The other thing about people is that they would be more vigilant about their health. They will, I don't know, do we have that graphic? Oh, great. See, life will go on. All right. This is what's going to happen. People are going to figure out a way around Obamacare. They would be more vigilant about their health. They would scrutinize treatment recommendations for effectiveness and safety. Everything has a risk, and sometimes over-treatment or incorrect treatment creates even more problems. There will be pressure on lawmakers to open the gate on indemnity-style health insurance plans. Right now, these plans are offered as supplemental plans, not primary care or not primary plans. Imagine picking up a health insurance policy in your 20s with a cap on the benefit amount over a particular period, let's say 20 or 30 years, similar to like how a term insurance policy would work. And you say, I'm going to buy this plan, and you have an incentive not to get out of it because you're going to have to be rewritten. So you have a strong incentive to pay that premium every year for the entire term of that plan. And the insurance company will not lose money because they know you're going to pay, and you're probably going to be more vigilant about your health, and they won't have to pay out this big chunk of change. I think hospitals and nonprofit organizations will provide charity care like they did in the past before Obamacare. They get tax benefits because of their nonprofit status. I think in some communities, I know this goes on in my community, they don't pay property tax. And that competes with other people who are maybe trying to do an independent route of healthcare because they got to pay the property tax. And it also drives up real estate prices. In my backyard, the hospital construction and expansion is unbelievable. They've created a city since probably in the last 10 years. You go down and every new construction building is part of a hospital. I mean, are we that sick? It's just stunning. Like, where is this money coming from? We wouldn't see multi-million-dollar packages for CEOs. Some of them are paid $10 million a year. And what are they rewarded for? They're rewarded for figuring out the best way to squeeze more money out of taxpayers, right?
Pretty much,
no
yeah.
Subsidies, yeah. With no subsidies, the ACA marketplace, yeah, what'll happen is with no subsidies, the ACA marketplace will fall apart. No one's going to buy these plans if they're too expensive, and insurance companies are going to want to get out of it because they're not going to be stuck with, the 20% because they just couldn't make it work. I mean, we can rest assured that, and we can also rest assured that there will be no backdoor funding for illegal immigrant healthcare, abortion, trans procedures. These are three things that people have a lot of moral objection to, and they are paid for under Obamacare. The discussions I've heard about Obamacare subsidies that's the big thing right now going on, because that's what's funding these programs: illegal healthcare, illegal immigrant healthcare, abortion pills, and the trans procedures, because these plans, the Obamacare plans, have to cover these things. And, we know with the 340B program, a lot of those drugs coming in involving trans procedures and abortion, they're all coming through Obamacare plans. So, if these things fall apart, those industries would probably have to compete, on their merits, and they could probably also fall apart as well. What is your thinking, Devin?
Well, I just lost my camera for some reason. I have to.
We can hear your voice.
Okay, yeah, sure. You won't see my face, but
all right. Well, I'll tell you what. While you're talking, I want to pop up something. Well, let me just tell you we'll talk about what I think is going to happen, what we think is going to happen. Maybe we can pop up. Yeah, there's a lot to discuss. I want to pop up this a couple of
let's fix the camera first, then we'll go back. This is getting confusing.
All right, should we
That's okay.
make a break here in the recording? Can you edit it?
Yes, let me do that now.
Okay. So, Devin, what's your thinking on this?
Well, if we step back to I think 2019, there were only about 12 million people enrolled in the marketplace plan. And the reason is because it was a bad value. The only people who thought marketplace plans were a good value were those that were getting big, heavy subsidies. The middle class and everyone else, it was just a bad deal. And so what Democrats are really trying to do now is they saw a doubling of the number of people to roughly 24, 25 million with a marketplace plan, and they don't want to give that up no matter what the cost, even if the cost is outrageous, about $380 billion over 10 years. But I think you're correct. If really all you have to do to reform the market is just allow the market to offer products that consumers want. For example, if you were to allow me to buy a plan that had maybe $1 million cap or even a $500,000 cap, that would be more than sufficient for probably 98% of the population. And it would be much cheaper to subsidize those 2% that were extremely unhealthy or are needing a lot of care. And so there's all kinds of market innovations that would occur if you would just allow the market to offer plans. It might be limited benefit plans. It might be, short-term plans, indemnity plans. It's just hard to explain how convoluted, how inflationary, and how poorly conceived and designed the Obamacare market plans are. And I think that, it would be really much healthier for the marketplace to find what people are willing to pay for.
Yeah. Andy, maybe this would be a good time to pull up that meme. This I thought was pretty funny. If you can do it now. This was in the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. They had a funny meme about Obamacare when it was started. So it's named after President Obama. He was the one behind it. Do we have that meme that we can pop up? All right, maybe we'll come back to it later. Let's talk about what we think is really going to happen. Here's my thinking. I think Republicans are going to agree to a temporary extension of subsidies just to get them past the midterms. And they might set a limit on the subsidies to insurers. I think they might demand more flexibility for states to set up reinsurance markets for their residents. That's what's existed. Those are for people with significant disabilities, and that's what existed before Obamacare. So they were great programs. In my state, they were known as the insurer of last resort, and people got really good care. It was a small percentage of people that really had significant healthcare needs. But what it did was it put those people in a separate pool and found a separate funding mechanism for them. And then it kept people in the insurance market. And that's how insurance works. You get some people to support it at various points in time. And sometimes you'll be the big user, sometimes you won't. But over time, it stretches out and it makes it feasible for insurance companies. It's really risk protection, and we don't do that. We've turned it into a payment plan. I think maybe what we might be able to do also, the Republicans might try to squeeze and get some more movement on HSAs. We got a little bit of movement under the One Big Beautiful Bill. We expanded it to I think 10 million people. We might be able to do that for $20 million. And maybe we expand HSAs to cover all the plans in Obamacare. Right now, the bronze plan, I think, is the only one, or the catastrophic plans. Some of those plans do not allow people to have HSAs. Mm-hmm. And then it would be also really great, but I don't know that this would ever happen, is to give that subsidy directly to the enrollee in the form of a tax credit, so that they could use it in the following tax year. And I know that's a long stretch, but and the insurance companies will go ballistic over it because they think they'll never get their money from the enrollee. But right now, people are applying for these subsidies and basically working through agents who teach them how to game it. And they predict what their income is going to be. And then the subsidies are given on somebody's, declaration of what their income is going to be. And then I don't know how vigilant they are in making sure that they lived up to that. So it's possible somebody makes $500,000 a year and gets a subsidy to pay for Obamacare. We've got a lot of sloppiness, and I know they tried to, take care of that in some of the provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill. What do you think is going to happen? Are we going to keep the government shut down? I mean, November, the clock is ticking. That's like a month and a half away.
Well, I think you raised an important point, and that is this is a good opportunity to negotiate reforms to Obamacare. Rather than just rubber stamp, okay, we'll spend $380 billion over 10 years. Maybe the Republicans will say we will extend some of the subsidies in return for some marketplace reforms that will make Obamacare, more stable. And I think that would be the most logical compromise, I guess. And how that'll work. Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll extend the subsidies, but not to families of four earning $128,000 a year, because that's well into middle class. I mean, upper middle class. Maybe they will have them taper off. There's a variety of things, but we're out of time is the only problem. So maybe they can do a stopgap measure for a couple months while they try to agree on some reforms that will help the market. And I think, I think we're going to talk about some of those in a minute that have been suggested, including
I want to point this out. Ovik Roy, who is well known in the free market space for healthcare, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. I wonder if we could pull that up. This came out last week, October 1st. This would be the Washington Post op-ed. We have that there. There we go. Is that it? Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So what he said basically is that a bipartisan compromise could end the government shutdown. So maybe Republicans might be smart to get some really good reforms in Obamacare, use this opportunity. And what he's recommending is, he points out to extend the subsidies would cost taxpayers $350 billion over the next decade. That is amazingly unbelievable. He said there will be people who will really be out if the subsidies were to expire. And that is going to cause a political problem, even to some people who are kind of neutral, even Republicans. There's a big political concern here that the balance of power could shift in Congress if this thing goes out of control. He proposes a 1 to 2 year extension, includes a premium reduction to young people. And then he wants to put aside $10 billion for a reinsurance fund for those people with significant illness and disabilities that we talked about. Now, I don't know. I don't think the Dems want to give too much control back to the states. I think they want to make this idea that the whole thing has to apply for the whole country. Mm-hmm. And that's how that's the part of their party mantra. Lower premiums for young people may come at the expense also of pre-Medicare folks. Their premiums could go up. So like if we made the premiums cheaper for younger people to keep them in Obamacare, somebody's premiums are going to go up. And so maybe they might drop it. I don't know. Do you think this is
my worry,
really, that the Republicans could take advantage of?
I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the actuaries say about, because as you said, they currently require a 1 to 3 rate band. In other words, that 22-year-old that is not likely to see a doctor for any reason would pay only, or I would pay only 3 times more than that 22-year-old. And there's been a lot of discussion that maybe that should be 5 to 1. Yeah. Would that raise my premiums? I'd want to see the numbers. So it's I'd rather see a little bit of risk, rating for risk than just arbitrarily creating bands you shove people into. But he also mentions, as we've kind of touched on, direct funding for pre-existing conditions. I mean, kind of like a high risk pool, like you said. Yeah. And before we get there, I'd probably want to allow or reduce the ban on lifetime or annual caps, because that would just be a blank check from the government. It's a subsidy is from taxpayers, and that would also be from taxpayers. We need to look for what would make it more efficient. It's currently not efficient because people are over, 80% of the population who enrolls is overcharged, so that 10, maybe 15%, get a better deal. Right. And that's not stable, because people like me say, what are the odds that I'm going to need, more than $20,000 worth of care, which is the threshold I would have to pay before I would get any kind of coverage. So, I'm looking at what is my risk? What is my expected cost? The odds of having more than $20,000 is less than 1%, probably.
Yeah. I mean, somebody with significant disabilities may not have the lifespan that a healthy person would have, right? So you're not going to be paying, they're not going to be covered in a plan that's going to take them to age 100. That may not be realistic. And so they may not, those limits may not be all that devastating to them. But I see what you're saying, that I will tell you, I've had personal experience with this with a very sick loved one. And I will tell you, straight face, we spent more time in the financial aid office where they mined the insurance policy than we did before a doctor. And what they would do is they'd max out the policy. They'd see how much they could bill to get away with. And my loved one's care was like $4 million before he died. And I just thought it was stunning. And I think that's why these hospitals, they look at this stuff and they mine the plans. And when there is no limit, they will go for the sky. And that's what we're dealing with right now. I want to pull up a couple of things here. We'll leave this. We could talk about this for hours. But there was an interesting editorial in the Washington Post. Now, remember, I don't know if we could pull that up. The publisher of the Washington Post is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, a pretty successful company. So, Jeff Bezos knows what he's doing. This was on October 5th. Do we have that, Andy? Can we pull up that editorial? All right. So I want to pull up this op-ed, or actually an editorial in the Washington Post. The publisher is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, a pretty successful company. He knows what he's talking about. This was on October 5th. And this line in the editorial said this: the real problem is that Obamacare was never actually affordable. This is how entitlement programs work. Once you habituate people to some generous government handout, they grow dependent on it, and it becomes politically perilous, if not impossible, to fully claw it back. Now, they're basically saying a statement of fact. They're not recommending that we do claw it back. So I guess there's that in there. The other thing I want to pull up, so I thought that was kind of significant coming out of the Washington Post. The other thing is a really funny meme that was in the Committee to Unleash Prosperity blog post. That's the one. There we go. Okay. We told them healthcare was free. There's Obama laughing. I thought that was pretty funny. It's 15 years out. Obamacare went into effect 2014. It took us a couple of years to kind of figure out how this thing was going to play out. It's now 11 years, and we know full well that this thing is not working. So time to end it. And I don't know. I guess we will see. All right. Let's move on to our next topic, which is kind of related to Obamacare, because like I mentioned earlier, I have seen an explosion of hospital construction and expansion in my little neck of the woods. And I keep wondering, my goodness, are we getting sicker? Where are these sick people coming from? This was a great little article by the American Association, the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. If we can go down, scroll down to the graphic that they have here, it shows, look at this map. Okay, so this is the industry that existed in 1990. And you can see 1990, most of the country, the biggest driver for the economy in states was manufacturing. Look what it is. This is 2013. Okay, so imagine what it's like today. I bet the whole thing is blue. But look at all the blue states, and that's healthcare. Are we sicker? I mean, my goodness, I know that we have baby boomers and they're getting older, and maybe that's what we're seeing. But my goodness, technology also improves. So we shouldn't see this level of, healthcare spending in our economy. It just doesn't make sense. We don't see other countries spending money like this on healthcare. What do you think, Devin?
Yeah, nearly $1.05, nearly 20% of the economy is now healthcare. And I mean, do you really, it's hard to explain in terms that people can fathom that 1/5 of our entire national income goes for hospitals and drug companies and doctors, because the average person, the average worker, let's say, is probably, they're paying for insurance, but they're not going to the doctor every week. They're not going to the doctor every once a month. They're probably going maybe every other month. Some of that will be well visits. So, but yeah, it is. I looked at this graph before we started, and I thought, good Lord, that's healthcare is the biggest industry in many states, and like you said, it's in my neighborhood. Every hospital has a construction crane.
Yeah.
And they're adding on, and new hospitals are going up. I'm in a growing area, so that makes a little bit of sense. But where's this money coming from? Well, I can tell you where it's coming from. It's coming from about half from the federal government, or federal and state government, and the other half is coming from our wages mostly, or our take-home pay. And for the average, one thing I always go back to, for the average worker, if they really understood that about $25,000, $26,000 of their wages is being, diverted for healthcare that they may not be using much of, or they demand control of that money. And that would be better, because cross subsidies don't work. They're never efficient, but because it breaks the feedback loop between consumers and producers. You go to your local Kroger, and they know you're price sensitive. They know you might want a premium brand, but you're still price sensitive. In healthcare, we've broken that link by intentionally creating cross subsidies, and this blue atlas is the result.
Yeah. What we have is a churning economy. We're not producing things. We're taking capital from one sector and moving it to another. That's what a service economy does. And here's the thing. We're spending all this money on healthcare. We have a shortage of doctors and medical professionals. Most of this money is going to administration and middlemen. And they are not producing anything really, except taking the money from one hand and passing it over to another. A churning economy. And that's what we're seeing in healthcare today. That's why we have sick people, because that money is not going into healthcare. It's going into all the regulation compliance, construction, administrators. My goodness. And that's what happens, because you're right. Half that money comes from the government. CEOs are rewarded for figuring out the best ways to get that money. Hospital CEOs, insurance companies have figured out the best way to get their premiums paid by the government. They don't have to go chasing after consumers to pay their premiums. They just get the money directly from the government. So I don't know. I thought that was a very good graphic, and maybe I'd love to see what it looks like today. Let's move on to our final topic. This came out this week. Costco is going to sell Ozempic and the Wegovy. These are the fat reduction drugs. And I think this is a really good development, because right now this is direct pay. So they're going to sell it for $500, which means that perhaps insurance companies and drug plans will say, no, we're not going to pay for this. You can pay for it. $500 a month is affordable if you value it. And, these drugs, people don't forget, 1 in 8 people have used these drugs in our country. Insurance companies up until this point loved it because, it was driving people to insurance plans or whatever. But if this coverage drops, imagine what would happen. People would have to evaluate the drug on its merits. This drug has to be taken for a lifetime. That's a lot of money. It's $6,000 a year for a lifetime. And, how much was it selling for before? We had reports that compound pharmacies were making semaglutides for like $200 a month. That was a little more reasonable. But the price to insurers was like $950, $1,000, a little over $1,000 a month. a couple of other things, $500 a month could really get you, you could spend a lot of money. $500 a month, you could join the nicest healthcare club in the country, go to a nice gym, even hire a personal trainer, get a better diet. And, I think, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. It is a great development. $500 or $4.99 a month is definitely a discount. I mean, some of these drugs have a list price of, I don't know, like $1,200, $1,300 a month. So yeah, that's a great deal. But what I don't understand, but I would be curious about, because the dosages vary. A morbidly obese individual with diabetes would be on a different dose than someone who's just, needing to lose some weight. And so that, I've written about, saving money on drugs by, using your brain. And I'm wondering if you could buy one auto injector that had a large quantity and just micro dose it, for someone who's just, and make it last more than a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
And which is, I think that's probably a better idea for many people is go at it slowly. Don't try to hit it all quickly. And that touches on another topic, which there's a huge market for regular people that are just 30 pounds overweight, let's say. I mean, they're selling it for $500 for people that are presumably obese or wealthy or vain. Why don't they make it where, ordinary people can microdose for, say, $100 a month?
Yeah.
There's a huge market there. And maybe that's where they're going. Maybe this is the first step. But yeah, I think it is a huge development, and that'll create competition with a couple of the others, like Manjaro, for example. It's a GLP-1 plus I think PIC. Basically, it has an additional factor that helps metabolize fat and control insulin sensitivity. And so you're seeing more and more competition. So hopefully that will translate into more consumer-friendly prices and options for a wider audience. But yeah, that's funny. I mean, it's still expensive, but it's affordable to some degree.
I'm hopeful that the price will go down enough, because what we do know about losing weight is it's a lifestyle. You have to make significant changes. It's work, it's effort. And the idea that you could take a pill and lose weight effortlessly has been very attractive to a lot of people. I was just shocked when I read that 1 in 8 people have tried these drugs. And they're fairly new. We don't know the long-term consequences. I would be afraid to take the drugs, even if I had like 20 pounds to lose, because I'd be afraid that if I went off the drug, my weight would explode. And, again, it comes down to changing your diet, finding more long-term solutions without side effects. I don't know what the side effects of these drugs are, but, you could do a lot. And, I wrote there a couple of years ago, the show South Park came out, and they had a hilarious episode on these weight loss drugs. And I wrote a review, and, in this review, in this episode, and I'm sure it's online somewhere, but I would highly encourage you. It's all right. I got to, give a caution here, because the language in it is not very nice. But in the beginning, it's about a character who's obese, and the mom is in the doctor's office, and she says, exercise just doesn't seem to work for him. And it's hilarious because it illustrates all the competing interests compounded by government regulation that make healthcare dysfunctional. My favorite scene in this episode was there were some, the kids' friends wanted to manufacture the drug in their basement, and they were buying ingredients from India to do it. And the sugar industry was outraged that all these people now didn't want to eat sugar. And there's a really hilarious scene in the episode where Captain Crunch stages a terrorist attack on an Indian drug ingredient company that's supplying the U.S. underground market. Yeah, it was a really good show. I don't know. Have you seen it?
I have not, but
It's probably out there. We'll put the link to the article, and I'm sure you could find it somewhere. But I just thought they did a remarkable job just showing all the dysfunction in the healthcare industry wrapped around this drug. All right. Well, we've chatted about a lot of stuff. We've run out of time. Be sure to check out healthcare news at the Heartland .org website and the Goodman Institute Health blog for free market perspectives on the very latest in healthcare. In the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and we'll be back here in a couple of weeks. Thanks for tuning in.